Story 1. Billionaire neighbor built an illegal championship golf green across my property line and sued me for trespassing on my own land, so I bought the only access road to his mansion. Part 1. The encroachment on family land. I own 12 acres of pristine pine forest and mountain property in rural Montana that was originally homesteaded by my great-grandfather in 1912. For over a century, our family maintained the land with strict conservation easements, leaving the timber untouched. 3 years ago, a wealthy venture capitalist named Marcus purchased the 30-acre adjacent parcel and began building a massive $16 million modern luxury compound. During the summer, I left for a 6-week forestry research expedition in Oregon. When I returned home in August, I drove down my boundary fence line and was horrified by what I found. Heavy commercial excavators had crossed onto my property, bulldozed nearly 4 acres of century-old ponderosa pines, and installed an elaborate, automated championship golf putting green complete with sand traps, underground drainage pipes, and commercial stadium lighting spanning 300 feet across my boundary line. Part 2. The arrogant confrontation on the terrace. I immediately retrieved my certified county boundary survey and walked over to the compound to confront Marcus. Marcus came out onto his heated limestone terrace holding an espresso, wearing a designer cashmere sweater. I handed him the survey showing the exact boundary markers his contractors had demolished. Marcus didn't even look at the maps. He smirked, took a sip of his coffee, and literally laughed in my face. He said, "Look around you, buddy. You live in a rustic timber cabin, and I have $80 million in liquid venture capital and 3 law firms on permanent retainer. That golf green stays where it is. If you don't like it, feel free to hire a local lawyer and sue me, but you'll run out of money for legal fees before we even complete the first deposition." He then whistled for his private security guards to escort me off what was legally my own deeded property, and his lawyers filed a frivolous injunction claiming I was harassing his family. Part 3. The 1888 timber deed discovery. Instead of hiring a standard local litigation attorney who could be overwhelmed by Marcus's high-priced legal team, I hired a legendary land use and historic property attorney in Helena who specialized in 19th-century Western property rights. We spent nearly a month inside the county clerk's archives digging through historical parcel maps, mining claims, and railway easements dating back to 1888. That was when we discovered a monumental oversight. Marcus's $16 million compound was on a completely landlocked parcel. The private half-mile gravel road that his luxury cars, construction crews, and delivery trucks used to access the state highway was not a public county road. It was an abandoned private timber easement owned by a defunct 1920s logging corporation that had dissolved 40 years ago and owed $38,000 in unpaid back taxes to the county. Part 4. Buying the road and locking the gates. I went straight to the county courthouse on a Monday morning with a cashier's check for $38,500 and purchased the delinquent tax deed in full. The moment the county recorder stamped and filed the deed, I legally owned the single road connecting Marcus's mega mansion to the rest of the world. On Thursday morning, I hired an industrial commercial gate contractor. We installed 2 massive reinforced steel security gates and 40 solid concrete highway barriers at both ends of the road. I placed massive reflective steel signs every 50 feet, private property of Montana Timber Trust. Authorized personnel only. All unauthorized vehicles will be impounded immediately. Part 5. The housewarming gala collapse and total surrender. The timing was absolute perfection. That very Saturday, Marcus was hosting an ultra-exclusive housewarming gala for 150 high society guests and VIP investors. At 3 p.m., 4 high-end commercial catering trucks, ICE delivery vans, and luxury guest limousines were completely stopped at my locked steel security gate. Marcus rushed down the hill in his golf cart screaming, threatening to have me arrested, and called the county sheriff. When 2 sheriff's deputies arrived, I handed them my certified tax deed and survey map. The senior deputy looked at Marcus and said, "Sir, this gentleman legally owns this road in fee simple. You do not have an easement, and you cannot drive on his land." Marcus was completely crushed. With his gala ruined and his mansion inaccessible, he had to sit at my kitchen table with his lawyers. To purchase a permanent road easement, Marcus had to pay me $950,000 in timber damages, pay $300,000 to completely remove his golf green and restore the land with 400 mature trees, and agree to pay a $5,000 monthly road maintenance fee for the rest of his life. All parts complete. All parts complete for this story. Moving to the next encounter. Story 2. New corporate director ordered our entire engineering department to log bathroom breaks and stop all client emergency work without VP written approval, so we complied until the company lost $4.2 million. Part 1. The 6-minute mandate and the new executive. It was an early Tuesday morning in October when our regional engineering division was summoned to a mandatory all-hands meeting at 7 a.m. Our company had just been acquired by an aggressive private equity firm, and they brought in a new director of operations named Richard. Richard had never written a line of code, never worked on an industrial network, and had zero technical background. He spent his entire career in private equity cost-cutting. Standing at the front of the conference room with a polished leather clipboard, Richard announced a complete overhaul of our daily operations. He declared that effective immediately, every single systems architect, network engineer, and database administrator would be required to account for their workday in strict 6-minute billing increments. Any task, discussion, or break that took more than 6 minutes had to be logged under a formal project code in their proprietary tracking software. When our lead architect, Dave, politely raised his hand and explained that critical server outages and cybersecurity alerts don't happen in neat 6-minute intervals, Richard cut him off. He slammed his hand on the podium and said, "If a client server is on fire, they can wait until you log your ticket. I want 0 undocumented labor hours. No exceptions for anyone." Part 2. The secret discovery in Section 14C. For the first 2 weeks under Richard's regime, our department was miserable. Morale plummeted, productivity dropped by 40%, and engineers were spending 2 hours a day just typing descriptions of what they were doing. But then Dave, our senior engineer who had been with the firm for 17 years, remembered an obscure clause in our master corporate service agreements. Dave spent an entire Saturday afternoon reviewing our government aerospace and defense contracts. Buried deep inside the federal compliance documentation, he found Section 14C. The clause stated that whenever executive leadership mandates formal procedural audits of technical personnel, all auditing and documentation procedures must be cross-verified by a second senior engineer and billed at the emergency double-time rate. Dave scheduled an off-site lunch with all 12 members of our engineering division. He laid out the contract on the table with a grin and said, "We are not going to argue with Richard. We are not going to file an HR complaint. We are going to follow his 6-minute logging mandate with absolute, catastrophic perfection." Part 3. Executing malicious compliance to the letter. On Monday morning at 8 a.m. sharp, Operation Absolute Compliance began. Every time an engineer opened an email, answered a client phone call, or walked to the break room for water, a second engineer accompanied them to time the activity with a stopwatch, cross-reference Section 14C, and file a formal dual-operator audit entry. If a routine database backup took 7 minutes instead of 6, 2 engineers spent 20 minutes logging the deviation code. By Thursday afternoon, our biggest enterprise defense client experienced a critical server failover glitch at 1:30 p.m. In the past, Dave would have fixed the issue in 4 minutes flat. But under Richard's strict written policy, Dave and 3 engineers spent 2 hours and 40 minutes drafting the authorization ticket, requesting formal written approval from Richard, and verifying the billing codes before touching a single terminal. When Richard stormed into the server room screaming about why the client's production environment was down, Dave looked him dead in the eye and said, "Richard, we are currently logging our required compliance increments per your mandatory memorandum." Part 4. The $4.2 million emergency boardroom audit. By the end of the month, the financial fallout was absolute carnage. Our 12-person department had generated over 3,800 hours of double-rate administrative compliance billing. Worse, because of the operational delays caused by Richard's documentation rules, our 2 largest aerospace clients invoked their contractual penalty clauses, demanding $3 million in breach of uptime compensation and canceling their upcoming contract renewals. The total losses surpassed $4.2 million in 28 days. The corporate board of directors and the executive chairman called an emergency closed-door audit at the corporate headquarters. Richard walked into the boardroom carrying a thick leather binder filled with 50 pages of printed spreadsheets, fully convinced he was going to fire our entire department for gross insubordination. He stood before the board members and accused us of intentionally sabotaging his management strategy. Part 5. The final karma and the aftermath. When the board asked for our department's response, Dave calmly stood up and plugged his laptop into the main projector. He displayed Richard's own signed, dated memorandum that explicitly ordered engineers to prioritize 6-minute logging over emergency client repairs with no exceptions. Dave then projected Section 14C of the Federal Defense Contract, showing that Richard's mandate legally obligated the company to pay the double-time audit rates. The board chairman's face turned completely white. He looked at Richard, took his glasses off, and asked, "Did you order technical staff to delay emergency client server repairs for paperwork?" Richard stammered, turned bright red, and couldn't form a sentence. Before the meeting even concluded, building security was instructed to escort Richard from the building with his personal belongings in a cardboard box. His employment was terminated for cause, forfeiting his entire stock package. Our department was awarded full retention bonuses, the 6-minute logging policy was permanently incinerated, and Dave was officially named Vice President of Technology. All parts complete. All parts complete for this story. Moving to the next encounter.